Good evening, friends. Warm welcome to Alpha Accurate Advisors AAA Winner Series webinar. This is second webinar. Last month also, we did one webinar where we invited founders of TCI Express. Friends, as you are aware, it is our constant endeavor to give as many insights as possible for capital markets, and also through Winner Series, the views on the industry, views on the businesses, the strategies from none other than the founders themselves. In these efforts, this second webinar, we have invited Century Plyboards, one of the founders, Mr. Keshav Bhajanka in this webinar. So I'm really thankful to all of you for participating in this webinar. And I also take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Keshav to come on the Zoom platform. Mr. Keshav Bhajanka is a very known face for Indian building material segment. I would not say it is just a plywood segment, but entire Indian material building segment. He is a country topper in IGSC exams from the Cambridge School in Calcutta. He started his career as a director in charge of decorative business of Century Ply in 2010. And just in last 3 years, he has successfully tripled the profits of that particular vertical of the company. That vertical is now very, very prominent for Century Ply. He has been instrumental in development of various new project verticals like exterior grade laminates, Vinland laminates, medium density fiberboard, amongst many other initiatives. He has successfully implemented long-term strategic initiatives like supply chain management within the company, creation of product management groups, and also played a critical role for entering into the MDF vertical, which is one of the fastest growing segment in India in recent times. He's of course in charge of investor relationship, and also plays a very important role in strategic decision making within the group. His aim is to make Century Ply one of India's top 50 Fortune 500 companies over next 4 to 5 years. Friends, Century Plywood, as you are aware, just giving 1 or 2 lines brief. As you are aware that we follow 3M investment approach, and Century Ply has fit that bill very nicely over last so many years. The company has successfully tripled its profit and created shareholders wealth. Its stock price and market cap went up by almost 4 times in last 3 to 4 years. With that opening remark, without wasting any time, I welcome once again Mr. Keshav, and from here we will have a very what I would say insightful question and answer session, which will give insights to the viewers and the investors about the building material segment. Thank you, Keshav. Thanks very much for giving your valuable time for this webinar. Just to
thank you so much, Rajesh.
Yeah,
thank you so much. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the kind words. If I get into all your credentials, I'm sure it will take up most of the session, so I'll not do it. But I would say that thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And just to start, get ball rolling, I always believe that before we do any micro analysis, we keep doing a lot of macro analysis. And therefore, let me start with a very simple question. That if I look at plywood industry, of course, every country has a different market sizes, and particularly for plywood, it also depends upon the weather conditions, because at times people use plywood and non-plywood and many other different materials which are available. So how do you see the market size of India as an opportunity? And also, is there any country which you can compare with India when you look at the market size?
Definitely. And I think this is a very, very pertinent question, because we always get faced with the dilemma that if MDF is growing fast, if particle board is growing fast, what is the future for plywood? So, in terms of population, India only has one rival, right? There's only one country that comes close to us, which is China. And I know that China is more developed than India at this point in time, but not too far ago, China was in a very similar position to India. They have developed over the course of the last 2 decades, but prior to that, they were where our economy is today. As of now, China's total plywood capacity is 200 million cubic meters per annum.
Mhm.
India's total capacity is 10 million cubic meter. So the population of almost 1:1, we are 90% of the population, but we are 1/20th their size as far as the plywood market is concerned. Yes, this is also relevant for a lot of other products. In MDF, our total capacity, India's total capacity would be 2 million cubic meters, whereas China's would be closer to 60 million cubic meters. In particle board, India's capacity would be 1.5 million cubic meters, and China's would be in excess of 40 million cubic meters. But the difference is that in India, MDF and particle board are at a very nascent stage. They have started growing now. Plywood, despite it being at a slightly more mature stage, is still 1/20th of China's market. So going forward, I think the growth in the plywood industry will be phenomenal, and it is going to be long term. This is not an industry that after 5, 10 years you'll see decline. It might be that after 5, 10 years you'll see the actual growth.
Oh, wow. Wow. And I think like any other industry, if I look at even the steel industry, and if I look at any infrastructure vertical, I think China is always 3, 5, 10 times multiplier compared to India's size. So in plywood also the story is same. And I think that is definitely, that gives you the kind of a potential what India can do, like in many other sectors. So in China also, just like in India, if I look at Indian market, the unorganized sector is huge. Probably 75% of the industry is still unorganized. How is it in China? Is it something similar?
To be honest, I don't have full details on China. Yes, they do have an unorganized sector, but in China, tax arbitrage is far more difficult to get away with than in India. So I'm assuming that their unorganized sector would be smaller. You see, when we speak of organized and unorganized, the basic way of quantifying this is whether you are paying taxes or not. And if you're not paying taxes, you belong to the unorganized sector. If you're paying taxes, you belong to the organized sector. So it's not really a question of market size. It's not a question of how much your turnover is, so on and so forth. The reason why the unorganized sector is so substantial is because the barrier to entry is low. In plywood, the capex is negligible because your asset turnover ratio for a company like Century will be as high as 4 to 5, whereas for the unorganized players, it would still be 2 to 3 times. So the capital investment being small, the asset turnover ratio being high, it looks like a very lucrative industry to get into. But we've had a lot of false dawns. We had demonetization where everybody said unorganized is finished. We had GST when everybody said unorganized is finished. All of these, people tend to underestimate the ingenuity of the Indian entrepreneur. I think we're the smartest group of people in the world.
True.
And the ability that we have to be able to overcome obstacles is sometimes underestimated. But COVID has played a major role in terms of hindering the unorganized sector's working capital cycle substantially. And I would say the second wave has been far worse. The reason I'm saying this is because you look at the end of the first wave, raw material prices were at their 4-year, 5-year lows. Whereas if you look at it today, they are at perhaps their all-time highs. If you look at commodities like melamine, commodities like phenol, I cannot remember a time when the prices were as high as they are today. So when you are coming out of a semi quasi lockdown to a very slow demand recovery, and your working capital cycle is stuck, and the raw material prices are at their highest in quite some time, it becomes very difficult for you to continue business if you are a smaller unorganized player. And I think that this perhaps can be an inflection point. But again, once bitten, twice shy. So we have had so many false dawns. I would not like to comment much on this. But maybe, yes, you'll see the organized sector growing from here on.
And you're absolutely right. The unorganized sector, people write it off easily, but actually they always come back. As you said, Indians are more smartest. So what exactly happens? Because the tax system is becoming stringent every day. So what makes that unorganized still continuing that advantage? So is it like just messing up with the system somewhere, making some adjustment and still thriving?
You see, in plywood, a lot of the raw materials, particularly core veneer, it is easy to source without bill because at the end of it, it comes into agricultural produce. So timber is bought. From timber, you do peeling and you get core veneer. So when one of your largest inputs can be bought in cash, that makes it easy. And if you look at this product, because this is a product that is purchased by the end consumer, right? You don't get input GST. If I am buying it for my house, I don't get any GST. So I am paying 118%. But more importantly, I am paying it from tax paid amount, which is going to always be a 50% high. If you have a 33% tax rate today, if you are at a 1 crore salary, your CTC, your take home would be 67 lakhs. So here you are going to be paying from an amount where you have already paid a 33% tax with 18% GST on top. But if you buy it without bill, you will be able to use non-tax paid money and without any effect of GST input credit, because either ways, to an individual homeowner, it is an expense, it is not an input. So because of this, the system is designed in such a way that arbitrage becomes very lucrative.
Hmm. Very nicely, and you're given a complete details that why
Very soon, we know. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
So the government has been taking a lot of steps, but honestly, I have not seen them materialize on ground as of yet. Hopefully, yes, they will find a way going forward. But as of now, I'm not seeing too many signs of government intervention having worked in curtailing the unorganized sector.
Wow, that's really a very in-depth and in detail. Simply, you have really well explained that why, unless and until you have a complete system of blocking the leakages, both from input perspective and also from the purchaser, the buyer's perspective, it is very difficult to attain the target GST what government is targeting when they started this implementation of GST. So, since you mentioned that organized sector is, therefore, at least for time being, remains like very high market share. But at the same time, if I look at Century Ply, very successfully from a otherwise, I would say, commodity product, because at times it is extremely difficult if you keep two plywood, next to each other. It is very difficult for customer to make it out, because the quality of the product is actually within it. It is at times very difficult to explain. And despite such a very high challenging kind of a task, Century Ply became number one within the organized market with almost, I would say, I think 25% market share. So what kind of efforts the company did over last 10, 15, 20 years to get to such kind of high market share?
You see, I can talk about branding, I can talk about a lot of other things, but first and foremost, I'd like to say that our chairman, when we were working out the company culture, the company vision, he came up with two words. The two words are Sarvada Sarvottam, always the best. So the vision for the company was always very clear that in terms of quality, we will offer our customers the best quality that you will get. We will offer our customers the best service that you will get. And our objective will always be to keep on improving. You cannot relax thinking that you're the market leader, because that is the surest way to fall from the market leader. So if you look at the past couple of years, when the lockdown happened, our team, and I know a lot of people, their work hours reduced. For our team, work hours went to 10 to 12 hours, because the entire management said that this is a time where you can work out some changes that you can otherwise not make. So we implemented a Salesforce automation tool. So we came up with a new technology known as ViroKill. ViroKill is a technology by which nanoparticles, there are specific nanoparticles which are embedded into the glue line of our products, by virtue of which any microbial, including viruses, that come into contact with the surface of our products, their walls are penetrated and they die. So this was a technology, this was an innovation that came out of COVID.
Okay.
We started on this during that time period. Following that up, this year we came up with firewall technology. So
Yeah.
I don't know whether you're aware or not, but Century
I-
Ply now comes with firewall technology.
Yeah.
And this is something which has been a subject that is very close to a lot of people's hearts. Anybody who has experienced fire, and we have seen fire in one of our offices. So we kept on thinking how to innovate, how to give the best to the customer. And in all of these instances, it was the dedication of the team towards that goal, Sarvada Sarvottam, that helped us achieve this. Alongside that, I think the brand, because if you have a product but customers don't know about it, that brand is unlikely to prosper, because at the end of it, you want customers to understand. So, in terms of our channel partners, we have invested considerable time and we have invested years understanding their needs, making sure that we work as one unit. We ensure that we have the most fair business practices. So, if you go to a dealer, he will always tell you that Century Ply is a company that gives you the best quality products and has the most ethical business practices. To target the end consumer, we have come up with our two largest campaigns in the past 2 years, one on ViroKill technology and now one on firewall. So I think it is a composite 360-degree vision which starts from production and ends up at sales and marketing. But at every point in time, the objective is very clear. We want to remain the best. We try to become the best, and then we want to remain the best. And that philosophy has helped us.
You're absolutely right. I think it is always that customer-centric approach, keep providing the best of the quality with consistency, and that's what is most important. I think if I'm not wrong, Century Ply probably is the only player. Correct me if I'm wrong, which gives very long-term, guarantee warranties of its product to the customers. Am I right?
Actually, all companies do. Some of the companies might not last as long as their warranties, but all the companies do. In India, there isn't too much that you can do on a false commitment, right?
I
But
see.
the companies that do give genuine commitments, they last. We are an example.
True. I think that gives a probably very high level of confidence to the buyer that in terms of what actually he's buying into. So, you mentioned that, one is, of course, keep giving the best in terms of the product innovations. And then you also touched upon in last, 6, 9, 12 months, what kind of innovation the company is doing. So when you look at from the customer perspective, over a period of time, these new products, the innovated products, how much it contributes to your, revenue? Does it contribute meaningfully, or it really takes very long time, 4, 6, 10 years to catch up to for the new products?
So see, the beauty is we don't develop new products. We upgrade our existing products. ViroKill technology is just a technology. Firewall technology is just a technology. Both are available in every single piece of Century Ply that you buy.
Okay.
These aren't separate product categories. We aren't charging a premium and selling a new niche category. This is a way to upgrade the Century Ply product. So if you look at it, 100% of our sales today is ViroKill. 100% of our sale today is firewall.
Okay. Super. Super. And in terms of the, plywood, the raw material is always a, since it is a agri produce, is always a challenge. And that too, the wood, which is kind of a green, anti-green kind of thing. So there are a number of times, I think in last 20, 25 years, there are a number of times different regulations kept coming in across the world, India or even Myanmar and Vietnam and other countries. So how you basically do this daunting task of collecting raw material on everyday basis? What exactly, the secret of that raw material efficient collection, and then how you go about it?
Plywood is actually one of the most green products that you will ever find. The reason I'm saying this is because when you make plywood, when you make MDF, when you make particle board, the bulk of your raw material is agroforestry. The more such units you have, the more agroforestry will take place. I'll give you an example. We have come up with a plant in Hoshiarpur, which is in Punjab, and the adjoining areas, the quantum of agroforestry has doubled in the last 5 years. So if you have the demand, farmers will grow it. It's a cash crop. So the majority of the raw material for plywood and all of the raw material for MDF and particle board comes from agroforestry. Having said that, what you are referring to is face veneer, which is the top layer and the bottom layer of plywood. Now, the average thickness of plywood is 12 mm, and the top layer and the bottom layer put together are 0.6 mm. So we are only sourcing 5% from forestry timber, which is banned in India, which has been banned in Myanmar, and so on and so forth. But even forests have to be harvested. The dead wood needs to be removed. Otherwise, carbon sequestration won't take place. Otherwise, so a lot of countries, Germany grows forestry timber as a cash crop. The cycles are longer, so we in India might not be able to afford it. But when you have 1% interest, you can grow a product for 20 years also. If you look at Gabon, their entire economy is now dependent on this sustainable agroforestry, forestry timber that they are coming up with. So going forward, I think raw material sourcing is not going to be a challenge at all. And to be honest, I'm not even involved in it. As you know, we're a professional company.
Yeah.
So we have a professional team that looks after it. And on a day-to-day basis, forget day-to-day, on a year-to-year basis also, I don't think we face much challenge. This used to be the case 3-4 years earlier because there used to be a little bit of affinity in the Indian market to a particular species of timber called gudgeon for the face. Now, with Myanmar shutting down shop, that affinity to that timber is no longer possible. So now the entire world is our playground.
I think you have really clarified, because there is a myth in the market. Because whenever I talk about century plywood to on general dining table, there is always a perception, and it is always instead of me explaining it is a myth, it is good that you, broke that myth. That only 5% is what is basically banned. Otherwise, everything is available in India, and it is allowed to do as actually it is, as you rightly said. In fact, it adds to the green economy rather than
Yes,
reducing.
it does.
And that's how Germany is also doing it in such a high scale. And that reminds me, since you're talking about Germany, and one of my very good friend is also in the similar industry. What I'm hearing is that in last particularly 3, 4, 5 months, the entire shipment related issues, because there are a lot of woods is load related item gets imported also in India, not in India, across the world, US and so on and so forth. And therefore all of a sudden is kind of a shortage issues what the industry is facing at large, particularly in India, because most of the German things are going to US and something like that. Can you
Yeah.
throw some light on that?
I think, you touched on a very, very pertinent point. The reason I'm saying this is because it has 2, 3 points mixed in it. One is the entire commodity market. The commodity market has gone for a toss. So if you look at any commodity, the sort of pricing that we are seeing, and I'm talking about absolute commodities, chemicals. I'm talking about, the base products that can go into production. The price of a particular chemical has tripled over the course of the last 1 year.
True.
Having said that, this has been aided, or this has been made worse by the supply chain aspect across the world, because of container movement, something has gone wrong in the past 1 year. Shipping freights have gone through the roof,
True.
and alongside that, availability of berths has become so much more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But to be very honest with you, I don't want to sound crude, but this has actually played into our hands a little bit. You see, we have the strongest balance sheet in the industry. We have the strongest sourcing team in the industry. So we have been able to account for these a little bit earlier than most. We've been able to ramp up our inventories. During the whole of the lockdown in Q1, we actually ran our production facilities 100%, even when the market was shut. If a factory was allowed to produce, say at 50% capacity, we would be running it at 50% capacity, not 49.
Wow.
So we have been able to take strategic calls, anticipating what is going to come next, because we had the team, because we had the balance sheet. So that enabled us to take long-term calls. And I think the unorganized sector in particular has felt the pinch of what you just said, because it is a fact. Not just Germany. If you look at sourcing from any part of the world, it has become so much more difficult. The costs have shot up, not just the raw material price, the transportation costs have shot up. But we have been able to take long-term bets. At the same time, we have pricing power because we're the market leader. I don't need to wait for anybody to increase my prices. So we have been able to take price increases as and when raw material prices increase. So you will see our margins weren't hit, whereas the industry suffered really badly during this time period. So I think because of both of those things, we have somewhat been helped by this scenario. I'm not saying it's a good scenario. I'm just saying that, it sort of plays into the organized players' hands.
You are absolutely right. I think the organized sector, and that's what we keep saying even to most of our investors, that when you buy the businesses where there are only limited number of players, and within that, if you buy the top three, number one, number two, ideally number one, then the kind of competitive advantage they enjoy in both cycle when it's going up or when cycle is going down. Because when the cycle is going down, there are companies which may close down because of the leverage issues, and when the cycle goes up, they cannot buy the working capital. Bankers may not allow them to get more working capital loans and many such issues. So the leaders are rightly positioned to navigate the upturn and downturn of the business cycle, and that actually further helps you to gain more market share, because maybe after pandemic wave 2, Century Plywood market share, when the economy becomes normalized, probably it may inch up further compared to what we have seen in last probably 12, 18, 24 months.
Absolutely.
We completely agree on that. In terms of one more thing which we have observed, particularly, I mean, the trend was always there, but from last 5-7 years, the leaders are slowly entering into the adjacent markets, to their core, and rightly, even Century Ply has also done the same. Slowly, not only you focused more on your core business plywood, but slowly you have expanded to laminate, and then you expanded also into MDF. From the viewer's perspective, can you just tell us, what the thought was when you started to diversify beyond plywood? One is, of course, to reduce the risk on single segment, but how you thought about it? At what point of time you thought that it is now relevant to enter into other segment? And what was the your dining table discussion within the founders and the team that okay, let's start अभी plywood तो करेंगे, लेकिन अभी दूसरा भी 2-3 segment में let's do business in that. So can you give some color on that?
Fortunately or unfortunately, we are a very conservative company. The chairman has a belief. He says turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is reality. So I only want to be in businesses where we can make money. Just doing turnover for the heck of it isn't where we specialize. That's never been our approach.
True.
We have a brand, and it is a very strong brand, but there are a lot of market leading brands. I think one difference is we have the best quality perception in the industry. Even if you speak to competition dealers, they will swear for Century Ply products. They will say that, हाँ sir, product का quality में कुछ खराब नहीं है, दाम ज़्यादा है. That in itself is sort of a glowing recommendation, right?
True.
So we said, when we have this quality perception, when we have very happy customers, I'm not just talking about a customer such as yourself, I'm talking about happy dealers, I'm talking about happy architects, happy interior designers, happy carpenters and contractors. When these people have trust in a brand, if you can extrapolate that brand to another product that sells through the same distribution network, then long term you are likely to be successful. So we took a calculated risk on laminates in the year 2004 with this thought process, and we took quite some time to scale it up. Till 2012, we only had 2 presses. From 2004 to 2012, we only had 2 presses. Today we have 7, and we're now embarking on a journey to 10 presses. So we have taken time because we are a little conservative. We first get into a business, we understand the full dynamics, and then after we have a certain potential, after we have a certain presence, then we start charting the journey to how to become a market leader. In MDF, we started with a small capacity of 600 cubic meters. Now, with the next 2 expansions in line, we should be at a capacity of 1700 cubic meters. So that is how this company functions. We identify a product category. We take a lot of time deciding. It's not we aren't quick. We are slow because we take our time. We understand all the pros, cons, the caveats. We do the cash flow modeling, and that is an exercise that we need to account for the how do I put it? In most cases, you will see that there is a simulation done for a sensitivity which has 3 or 4 scenarios. In our case, there are 50 scenarios that are prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So what will happen in each of those, and then we get into an industry. So from inception, we were a veneer company and a plywood company. Then we got into laminates, and then we got into MDF. These are the 3 segments. And I think for the next N number of years, you will see the company in only these products, because right now we have not started discussing any other category, and we take normally 3 to 4 years to get into something else. But yes, in each of these categories, the brand Century Ply, the team that we have been able to create, and the sort of pace with which we can move post getting into a category. If you look at MDF, we were the fastest to achieve 100% capacity utilization in the first line. Competition took close to 7-8 years. We took 2. So once we get into a particular product, then the execution capabilities that we have, I would say, are a differentiator, and the brand, of course, is a differentiator.
So since you touched upon your entry into MDF, I think last conference calls also you are mentioning that the Indian MDF industry has a potential to grow probably 4 times compared to where it is just over next 4 or 5 years. So what is this? Why such high growth in MDF? Number one, and number two, how India is basically, that means the consumption mix is going to change slowly, gradually from current to something else. So what is going to be driving growth drivers for such high MDF? And how do you see Century Ply to play what kind of role as the industry becomes 4 or 5 times from current levels?
You see, the reason I feel that the growth is going to be so, or the reason I know that the growth is going to be so high is because of the base. The base is just 1.5 to 2 million cubic meters per annum, which is nothing. And this was further 1/5 about 7-8 years ago. And this capacity, this 5x capacity, has been absorbed. Today, you are seeing all plants running at good capacities. So the demand has started, the acceptability of the product has come in. Since the acceptability of the product has come in, now the runway is clear. That is why I believe that it is going to grow very fast. Why will Century Ply do well in this? Because we are the market leader, not in terms of volume. Don't get me wrong, competition is bigger. We have the highest price. The reason we have the highest price is because I have the best quality MDF in India. That is established. So now it is a function of capacities coming in. The basic problem in establishing a capacity in MDF is the capital cost, which is high. Today, a plywood factory of a turnover of say 500 crores, you can establish for 100 crores capex. In MDF, competition would take at least 400, 450 crores. Century Ply would take at least 350 crores to establish that same factory. So, because of this, capex becomes a challenge. And for us, that is not a challenge. You have seen our cash flows. You have seen how prudent we are with cash. So once we identify a project, it becomes very easy for us to go ahead with it. Hence, I believe that with the brand, with the position of market leader in terms of perception, in terms of quality, in terms of price, with the sales team that we have set up, and with the fact that our execution capabilities, well, I'll give you an example. The first plant that we set up, the plant in Hoshiarpur, the groundbreaking ceremony was done by us on the 2nd of April of 2016. The reason I remember is because I was requesting everyone 1st April mat karo, April Fool's Day. So on the 2nd April, we did it. On the 29th of July 2017, I was in the plant and we produced our first board. After that, it took us 1.5 months to stabilize and to begin commercial production. But the first board was produced, 18 mm thickness MDF board was produced in the Hoshiarpur plant on the 29th of July 2017. This is despite a andolan taking place in that locality, driven by vested interest groups against us, that delayed our plant coming up for about 2 months or 2.5, 3 months. We set up our first MDF capacity in 16 months. The next fastest capacity to have been set up in India is 30 months. And now I know how to set up an MDF plant. So my second line, I can assure you, I'll try to beat the first line's record. Hence, in terms of execution, I think we may be better than others.
I mean, no doubt about it. I think Century Ply wood is, I think, you are the hallmark when it comes to the the efficiency standards. So over next, since in MDF, before I move to Century's plan in MDF, what is also plays very important role is the location, am I right? The north versus south.
Yes,
and,
yes.
So from the viewers, for the benefit of viewers, like in plywood, you have a huge unorganized. In MDF, probably the unorganized would be much lesser because the capital intensity is much higher, and also the kind of the minimum economies of scale what you require is also much higher, am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Unorganized is smaller in MDF. And see, there is a way for unorganized to get in.
Mm-hmm.
There's something called a multi-daylight press, which is cheaper. The operating cost is higher, but the capex cost is much cheaper. But the limitation of a multi-daylight press is that you cannot produce below a certain thickness. Let's assume 6.5 mm. When you cannot produce below 6.5 mm, a vast chunk of the market goes away from you. So if you want to be a producer that has the entire range of products which most distributors or which most OEMs want, then it is impossible for you to do it with the capital light model.
Got it. And what about imports?
Imports have played a significant role in the past, a very significant role. But again, you need to understand one thing. The price of MDF is typically around 30,000 rupees per ton. Transporting material from, let's say, Tuticorin port to Delhi would cost you between 4,500 to 5,000 rupees via road. Now, that in itself is 16, 17% of your price, selling price. So transportation cost plays a major role. Now what has happened is that the shipping costs have increased substantially. And that shipping cost increase has caused imported MDF to become unviable in India. In any case, in the north, we were very competitive because of the transportation cost. And now because of this phenomena, even the south has become a highly viable location.
Mhm.
So
I see.
imports used to be very substantial, but now they have reduced in size substantially.
I see. So now basically, so even if the shipping costs, of course, currently the shipping costs are very high, but even when the shipping costs normalize, you don't see import as a major threat to the domestic market.
So they are. If the shipping cost reduces, and today international prices of MDF have also gone up because there's in general a demand spurt. So people are exporting from India also now. But um, even if both of those happen, what happens is there's a change in consumer behavior, right? When you import, you need to wait for 3 months of material, you need to stock at your end. Now, a person who has been doing that for quite a few years has suddenly realized that I will get inventory in a week. I don't need to open any LC, nothing. 1 week, my inventory will be here. When the material is being dispatched, I need to pay before that, and straight up the material arrives in my factory. So my stock holding comes down. Some people might even let go of their go down. So to get all of that functional again, it's a dynamic situation. If tomorrow, uh, God forbid, but the price of shipping crashes, the price of MDF internationally crashes, there will be pressure on the coastal areas. But I think now the domestic manufacturers are far better prepared on how to, overcome the same and how to maintain their own position.
Got it. So by when, your MDF capacity, how much you are planning to expand over next 3-4 years?
So 3-4 years is a long horizon. We have, I'll tell you in the next 2.5 years what we are planning. We are expanding the capacity in Hoshiarpur. So we are coming up with a second line in Hoshiarpur, which will be 350 cubic meters. That second line should be established. We were hoping to launch it in April itself, to begin commercial production in April. But because of COVID, things are a little hazy. But we are still very hopeful that by June we will definitely come up with production in that new line. We had a capacity plan for the south, which we had initially envisioned to launch within FY23. But again, because of COVID, there are certain variables. The licenses and the land with the government is taking a little longer than expected for obvious reasons. Everyone is more inclined to save lives, as you and I would have been also.
Sure.
But I'm sure that once the COVID threat subsides a little bit more and people have a little more time in their hands, the governments have a little more time, we'll be able to come up with a solution. Hopefully in this quarter. Hopefully, then I can give you a lot clearer picture.
Yeah, so that's basically substantial growth for over next 3 years or so in the.
Oh, sorry, that is going to be a 700 cubic meter capacity. So we will be going from a 600 cubic meter capacity to almost a 1700 cubic meter capacity within the next 2.5 years.
Yeah, so there's almost like 3x, 3 times growth over next 2.5-3 years, which will definitely add to the overall company's growth as well. And the margins also in MDF segment are significantly superior compared to the plywood and laminate segment. So that also means higher profitability growth as well.
See, they have to be, technically, if you look at it, because the asset turnover ratio, it's a different ballgame.
Sure.
So MDF requires higher EBITDA margins as an industry to survive. Now, on certain balance sheets like ours, because we don't have debt, you don't see it. But if you take debt into account, that becomes a substantial part. Hence, you need a higher EBITDA. The reason that us or maybe some other players make it look a little easier is because there isn't debt. But if you take debt of 500 crores and you come up with a unit that has a turnover of 700 crores, you
Yeah,
have at 10% a 50 crore annual interest component, right? So that straight up becomes over 7%.
true, true, true. And in the opening remark, you talked about the distribution network, and I think for any consumer-facing business, distribution is the backbone for any such business. So over a period of time, how you have expanded your distribution expansion, and in terms of the underlying return on capital employed, underlying return on investment by distributors, typically what kind of return they make, and how do you see this distributor expansion over next 3-5 years?
Our distributors make in excess of 30% ROI. So that is a standard that we have maintained. And I think that is why most of the dealers who started with Century Ply, even in the year 95, 96, are still our dealers or distributors. So it's a decent return. Distribution is the only way to grow. No matter how much you advertise, if the product is not available, the product will not sell. So this has been the primary focus of the company since day one. And our MD, my boss, he is fully focused on how to increase our distribution presence.
Mhm.
So I'll give you an instance of the past couple of years. We have started a Salesforce automation tool. So Salesforce automation is nothing but every executive has on their phones exactly how many retailers he needs to visit in a day. Once he goes to that retailer, there's a geotagging that is automatically done. He just needs to click and he can fill out what he has discussed. He gets that these are the markets where I don't have a dealer yet, or I don't have a dealer who is interested in buying from me. So he can just click and he can fill out what he has discussed and he can get that dealer
Network.
in a way to ensure that that new retailer or that new distributor comes in line and that new distributor or retailer can start. So this has been one of the most, like I told you, in lockdown, this was one of the priority areas for us was getting the Salesforce automation tool rolled out. We have
Wow.
also rolled out a DMS, a distributor management system, across our laminate vertical. We started laminates because laminates is a little more complex. It has many more SKUs. So we said, let us take the difficult subject first, and then we'll move from there. And the DMS has already started to give us visibility in terms of markets, which clusters are we billing at, and which clusters there was a billing 3 years ago, but today there's no billing. So when you talk about retailer expansion, it doesn't necessarily have to be adding a new counter, right?
Sure.
Even if there are inactive counters and you get them back on track, you are ensuring retail expansion. So these are the sort of things that we have been doing, and it is one of our key focus areas.
So currently, how many distributors you would have?
We have a different module. In panel, we have a dealer come wholesaler module where there are more than 2,500 direct touch points. In laminates, we have 173 distributors today, and through them we cater to about 23,000 retailers pan India.
Sure. And what about MDF?
MDF, I don't have the exact numbers with me.
Sure.
That I'll have to get back to you.
Okay. Okay. So basically, over a period of, so is it like it will be internal target that every year, bearing COVID, but otherwise you keep expanding your distribution network by say
Yes,
by 5-10% every year kind of thing. That's how it goes.
definitely. We have a target for geographies. So suppose today you look at, say, Sambalpur market. If you have to go to the Sambalpur market, that main market, you have retailers, but now you need to appoint somebody in Jharsuguda. So maybe this year Jharsuguda will not be a focus market because my executive does not have the bandwidth. Then next year we will target that market to appoint retailers there. So it is a little more scientific than just having a number of 5%, 10%.
Sure.
But every year there's a dedicated target for an increase in spread. Spread meaning channels, retail expansion.
Sure. Sure. And last but not least, in terms of financials, of course, Century Ply is one of the company in India with one of the most capital efficient balance sheet within building material space. So internally, how you look at those pillars? Do you look at payback period? You look at minimum return on capital employed? You look at what are the various parameters you use internally to keep maintaining the best of the balance sheet?
So like I told you, the chairman's philosophy is quite simple. His philosophy is that turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is reality. So unless we can see clear profitability in a business, it could be 2 years hence, it could be 3 years hence, gestation period. But the end ROC that a business generates is what we look at. And by end, after we reach, say, 75-80% capacity utilization, above that is additional profit. But at that point, what exactly is going to be our ROC, so that at that point we can decide if we want to invest in new capacity or not.
True.
So that is the sort of capital allocation that we do. And again, being a very conservative, I think conservative is the wrong word. Being a pragmatic company, what happens is we don't. So you see a lot of companies now diversifying into ABC products and XYZ products, etc., etc. Here we take uh, our corporate governance does not allow us to do that. The board is very clear. We are a plywood company. We make plywood, laminates, MDF, particle board. So that is what we are, and that is what we will continue to be.
Great. Yeah, I think you are absolutely right. The focus on the competence on which the company has built for so many years, that should remain the priority. Otherwise, at times the misallocation of capital results into significant wealth destruction, and that we have seen in India. There are a number of companies actually they failed by doing so. So from the company's perspective, finance is of course one thing, products are one thing. The risk management at the at overall business model perspective, how you look at the risk management and how you try to mitigate those risks?
So this is one area the chairman does not have any functional responsibility. Of course, he is responsible for the company, but we have a professionalized setup. So if you look at the entire board of directors, that is chairman, MD, myself, other directors, none of us have a day-to-day role to play. We are more on a strategy level. But risk management is one area which lies with the chairman's office. So today, this is one of his focus areas. Suppose we saw that, 2.5, 3 years ago, Burma was going to give problems. So the decision to hedge our bets by setting up a unit in Gabon, that was taken by the chairman. We had already done it in Laos and we had failed there because of various problems in Laos. But that risk needed, that decision needed to be taken. And because of that, today we are safer. Otherwise, today, the scenario would have been, we would have been procuring raw material at a higher cost. Of course, you would have gotten raw material, but you would have taken it at a higher cost. Running the production units at maximum available or allowable capacity during the months of April to June, that was a strategic decision that is taken by chairman, because that is a big risk. What if your inventory does not dilute over the course of the next 3-4 months? Carrying cost may be low, but still it is a challenge for you. So any substantial strategic decision which has large bearing on the long-term health of the company or even medium-term health of the company is taken by the chairman's office. In the past 3-4 years, you would have seen that we would have a lot of forex, foreign denominated borrowing. After the volatility that we saw, we have a treasury department, and they came back to us saying that this volatility is going to remain. And if you take hedging, if you hedge your bet, against that domestic loans are better. You're getting, because we are a well-rated company, so you get capital at a nominal cost. So because of that, over the course of the past 3 years, we have reduced our forex denomination substantially. I think if you look at our balance sheet today, the impact of any fluctuation is far lesser than what it was 2-3 years ago. So these initiatives are strategically driven by the chairman, or rather by the chairman's office, him and his team.
Sure. Yeah, I think the risk management is something most critical, because once you manage the risk well, it's like in equity market, we say protect capital, create wealth, because one can keep creating wealth, but what about the capital? And that's something more important. And in plywood industry, I think the one issue, the fake products, how do you handle, is a little bit different issue. I mean, but just thought, what's your perspective and how you handle such things of fake products?
So, there are two perspectives on fake products. One is if somebody is claiming to sell Century Ply and is selling something else. So for that, now we have developed the Century Promise app, which is an innovation it's a beautiful innovation where every product that we make has a barcode. Take out your phone, download the app. You can scan and see whether that is a genuine original Century Ply product. Every single piece. Because like you said at the start, plywood is a product, when you put two words next to each other, you might not be able to tell anything, right?
Correct.
So this was an innovation that took us a lot of time, but we have finally been able to roll it out. The second is when people sell waterproof material, claim to be selling waterproof material, and they're actually selling MR material, which is moisture resistant material. So a lower product, lower price product at a much higher price with a much higher margin. So in this, as an industry, we need to take a stand against this. But unfortunately, till now, the federation has not been able to come up with some adequate measure to counteract this. We are still in discussions. I'm sure that as an industry, like the mutual fund industry has done something phenomenal, the
Yeah.
way they have promoted. So maybe going forward, you'll see something of that sort coming from our end as well. Maybe. But
Sure.
what we have done is for our customers, now if you look at the new Scenic advertisement, it says one thing, Asli waterproof fly. And that is what we are trying to communicate, that our second brand may be a little higher than the unorganized market, but you know what you are getting. If the difference to Century Ply was say 50, 45, 50%, now the difference to Scenic for you will be less than 15%, 20%. But you know you are getting the genuine product.
Mhm.
So at our end, we are trying, but I think to tackle this subject as a whole, the industry needs to act, which honestly today is not.
Got it. And what do you think about the impact of players like IKEA entering the Indian market?
I'm thrilled. They're going to be my customers going forward. If you look at it, we manufacture particle board, we manufacture MDF, and IKEA uses both of those products in a big way, and their quality standards aren't easy. So I'm looking at more business from them.
Wow. So basically, more players like that in organized furniture market, actually, it adds growth to companies like yours.
Yes, because we have the entire range, right?
Sure.
Somewhere that helps.
True. True. Last question from my side before we conclude. It has been a very successful journey, but no success is without challenges throughout the journey. So if you can share one or two such episodes where it was a real big challenge, and at times it was a very difficult time for the company to decide how to go about it, and how you manage the challenge.
Yes, so I'll tell you about COVID. So when COVID took place, the day, and that time we still had debt on our book. We had 200-300 crores of debt. So all our creditors started calling, saying that, sir, how much will you delay payment by, etc., etc., because some competition had told them that don't come back to us for 3 months and so on and so forth. It was a very, very alarming scenario, right? We didn't know what was going to happen. We
Yeah.
thought that maybe we'll have to write off an entire year. So I went to chairman, me, MD, we all sat with him because at the end, like I told you, he's responsible for risk management. He said, what should we do? So he said that any bill that is falling, any due date, that day it should be paid, or it should be paid a day in advance. Right now, we have the ability to take the hit. Our suppliers may not be able to. End result, for next few months, every single supplier gave us the lowest rate that you could have imagined, because they said this company has supported us during the worst of times.
Wow.
I'll give you another instance. Our dealers were struggling. They couldn't pay up. Century, our debtor management policy is very, very strict. I don't have a say in it. That only the MD decides, and nobody can change it by a day also. If it is 60 days, it's 60 days. If it's 30 days, 30 days, finished. No discussion. Now, during COVID, everyone's working capital was stuck. Our dealers were struggling. So we started receiving calls from dealers in panic saying, sir, kya kare, etc., etc. So at that point in time, the chairman said one single statement. He said, during the lockdown months, whatever days, we didn't know how long lockdown would be. This is like 2 weeks into it. Whatever the duration of the lockdown is, from the first day till the last day, that will be zero interest, extra credit days given to every single dealer from Century Plan. I cannot tell you how positive the response was from our family, our dealer family, our partners. They came back to us and said, sir, this is something that we knew Century would do it, but still thank you. So we have been able to take big calls. See, we have a very simple thing. We will produce quality material, we will produce with integrity, and we'll make sure that we have customer satisfaction, rather stakeholder satisfaction. So this is something that has held us in good stead.
Great. I think that's really very, very insightful, Keshav. Really great insights on the industry, as well as good insights into the company strategy and the business mode. People keep talking about the moat, and there are a number of books written by veterans globally on business moat. But actual business moat, one can understand only when one speaks with founders like you, who can actually give the complete insight, secret source of what you mean by the business moat. Thank you, Keshav, once again for your valuable time. I hope you also must have enjoyed the discussion as much as what we and I'm sure our investors would have enjoyed while listening to this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was completely my pleasure, and thanks again.
Thank you, friends. Thank you very much for spending your time on this Friday evening. And probably we'll connect again for the third AAA winners list webinar. Probably maybe by next month. Yeah, great. Thank you. Wish you good, happy weekend. Thanks. Bye, Keshav.